Welcome to episode 102 of Destination Linux. This is a podcast of opinions made up of four, and as you can see from the outtakes there, allegedly intelligent guys talking about their passion for Linux. So, I'm Rob, and with me today are my three podcasting pals, Ryan. How are you this week?
I'm doing amazing, man.
Good. And Noah, how are you?
Excellent. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. And our always on time friend, Michael, how are things?
Perfectly on time and great.
Good. So, keeping it on time, what have you been up to this week, Michael?
Well, I mean, I can't keep anything on time. You're going to give me like this open-ended thing. So,
oh no, what did you do?
Well, actually, what's interesting is that I redesigned the This Week in Linux visuals for the layouts that's coming out in the next episode. So it's completely different by like 30%. So not completely.
I was going to say, because I saw that and I thought, where's the difference?
Well, the camera's bigger, the viewport's smaller, the logo is no longer covering the viewport. And also I made it where the distro icons are like scrolling up the entire time I'm talking on all topics. So like the icons used to just be like I had like 30, but you could only see like 3 because I didn't have it moving. And now it moves and you can see a bunch of them. So like at any given time, there's, it cycles through 3 every like 5 seconds or something.
And what free and open source software did you use to make those edits?
OBS. Thank you.
Nice.
OBS actually does the scrolling for me and everything.
Okay.
Photoshop, everything else.
Would name some Adobe.
What was that, Michael?
Huh? What?
Nothing.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. So, Noah, what have you been up to?
I've been playing with a new product, not a new product, it's actually been out for a little bit, but it is an access point from Ubiquiti that actually contains a PA system. And so we're all familiar with the UAP AC Pro, at least if you listen to me, you're familiar with that device. And so it's probably the best access point on the market. Well, they've upgraded it now, and it contains actually a little miniature speaker inside of it. And so you can put these access points all over your house. They're designed for schools. Put them all over the schools, and then there's an app, and you hit on the app, and then you can make announcements through the app, and it comes out over the speakers, or you can schedule announcements or stuff like that. So
Nice.
I've been playing with that, and I think we're going to end up rolling those out in some schools.
Even better.
Very cool.
So, Ryan, what have you been getting into trouble with?
Well, I've been playing around with different types of decentralized services. So one of the services that I was checking out this week is called Open Bazaar, which is basically a peer-to-peer version of eBay that utilizes Bitcoin in order to make transactions with individuals, but it's completely decentralized except for the fact that you can assign basically to your account kind of like moderators or people to make sure that others are actually going through with the transactions and that type of stuff. Very interesting concept. I haven't purchased anything yet, but I'm kind of watching and seeing what things are out there. There's lots of awesome tech and Bitcoin related stuff and shirts and clothes and everything else you'd find on eBay. There's also some illegal stuff on there, so be careful with that there. But it's very interesting to see that. And also DTube, I've been playing around with a little more and uploaded my Arch review video that I did. That was community requested up there on DTube to check it out, which is another decentralized kind of alternative to YouTube out there, which I think is really interesting. As I understand it, if your videos get enough views, you get paid in Bitcoin there as well. So I'm kind of just checking out all these decentralized platforms, giving them a look and seeing what is really out there as alternatives to these other services.
How does DTube compare with PeerTube?
Well, I've never used PeerTube, so I can't really say, but DTube seems to have I don't think, does PeerTube have an ability, Michael, for you to get paid? Because I know DTube does. And
No,
I think that's one of the big differences is, if I'm going to switch from YouTube or somewhere else, you still want to be able to make money off the videos that you produce and by watch time and things like that. Because a lot of people aren't just going to pay you for videos that you're making. But DTube has that ability built in where they're basically paying you through Bitcoin cryptocurrencies as people watch.
Right.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting.
We have an email this week. It says, "Greetings. I've been using Linux since 2003 and starting on Mandrake Linux. I hopped around for a while looking for a distro that was functional and ended up on OpenSUSE. Now OpenSUSE Tumbleweed for the majority of my machines. I assist with home education of my kids with a few applications, Comprise, Tux Type, to name a few, using code weavers and crossover Linux. I use Rosetta Stone for language training, currently German and Latin. For teaching my oldest concepts about mechanical assembly and subassembly materials, I use LeoCAD. He gives a link to LeoCAD and my use at Cubicle Nate, a Lego CAD software based on OpenSUSE Linux. This is a real fun way to spark the fire of mechanical design. I use LibreOffice sometimes, Microsoft Office, using Crossover, which you don't have to do, by the way. When I hack around doing other graphic things, I use GIMP and Krita. I have never used Photoshop, but was pretty talented in Deluxe Paint V, Commodore Amigo back in the day. Can I do all of these things in Windows? Yes, maybe, but it isn't as fun or stable. The brilliant way KDE Plasma allows me to interact with the desktop makes it hard to use anything else. Easy backup, redundancy of data, and stupid easy, and provides an elevated level of peace and confidence as compared to Windows that it just can't provide. On top of all of that, I have KDE Connect, of which I have been a fan before it was cool. Is it something I just can't live without? I do admit, I think it is good. I have one Windows machine provided by my employer, and I have to keep it. I have to keep me from taking Linux for granted. It's easy to forget how good you have it on Linux. Thanks for all you guys do. The banter is great. Adding Noah was like adding my best friend I never actually met, even though he can't read my email. Nathan. So I maybe added that little last piece. But so just one quick note on that. So Microsoft Office, because I get this question once every 3 days. Somebody says, I need to be able to use Microsoft Office. I say, use LibreOffice. They say, well, I don't want to. I say, why? Well, the bold button and italics buttons are in a different place in LibreOffice than they are in Microsoft Office. Yes, I've actually gotten that as a complaint. Okay, well, if you absolutely insist on using Microsoft Office because the buttons are in a different place, you don't actually have to use Crossover. 360 will let you, 365, whatever they call it, you can sign up for a free account and you can use native Office in a web browser on Linux with no restrictions. And I have tons of clients that are doing that. It actually works pretty well.
Office 365, yeah.
Yep.
And did you notice this part when he says he hacks around doing graphics things? He uses GIMP and Krita. And this is the key part, Michael, I hope you're listening to. I have never used Photoshop.
I don't think it said that.
GIMP and Krita. That is amazing.
Yeah, I don't think. Oh, it did actually say that.
Open source alternatives.
Like it's like, oh, he's making that up.
Yeah, it did totally say that. But I mean, there's a difference between like
that wasn't a point.
We've already talked about this. It doesn't matter. So we've already talked about this. And what I will say is that KDE Connect has always been cool, like all the time. Just saying.
If he can't defend his use of Windows.
Deflect. I use a VM that's only purpose is Photoshop, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't count. It's a different thing.
Do you really not? I mean, so straight up. So you really don't have a physical install Windows. It's really all in a VM.
Correct. Yeah.
VirtualBox.
VirtualBox.
Really?
Yep.
So here's why I can kind of get behind that. So as an IT administrator that gets tasked of doing all sorts of things, I don't get any say in some of these things. Like we worked on a heating and cooling system at a hotel. I don't get to tell them, well, you can't use that heating and cooling system that you paid $25,000 for because it is a piece of Windows. Like that answer doesn't work, right? Like, right. And here's the thing. They don't like, if I walk in and say, well, I don't use Windows, they'll say, okay, well then you don't administrate our network. We'll find somebody else. So I don't have that luxury. But what I do have the luxury of doing is I can say, I do have a hard rule. I won't install Windows on my machine. So any of those one-off pieces of software, I run in a VM. And the truth of the matter is, honestly, running a Windows application inside of a Windows VM, license-wise, restriction-wise, stability-wise, all of that stuff is absolutely no different than running it in if they had a wine-wrapped version like all Linux users accept, like TeamViewer. Right? Exactly. It's when you actually replace your actual operating system and give up your stability and privacy to be able to run some applications. That for me is that hard. I will not cross line in the sand. I'd rather lose a client than do that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, I can't fault you for that.
Right. It's just a VM, and the only reason I do it is because as far as like I'm a professional designer, and GIMP is great for most people, not professional designers.
I still think you're a filthy dual booter, even though it's in a VM. I still consider you a filthy dual booter.
Wow. It's not though.
It's not dual booting. I'm still in Linux at all times.
VM.
I can't.
You don't have to. Okay, so
you have to start the VM.
You don't have to install. You don't have to install drivers. You have the ability of snapshots. When Windows crashes, it doesn't take. If you're running Telegram, and Photoshop, Windows can completely take a dump, and you restart that application. Telegram stays running, your email stays running, Destination Linux show notes stay running, the Destination Linux stream on YouTube still keeps running, the download at Pod get Destination Linux, that all still runs. All of that stuff still happens, even if Windows takes a dump. To me, that's the difference between dual booting and running a VM.
I also have it really customized so that there's no internet on the Windows side, so I don't have to worry about viruses getting through the internet because it doesn't exist there.
So you're like quarter filthy dual boot.
No, it's more like
16th.
Yes, I'll go with 16th. I'll go 16th.
12 top.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's take this to our patrons, and when they send us their emails in this week, is running Windows in a VM, does it make you a filthy dual booter? Answers in your emails, please, to comments@destinationlinux.org. And we'll get a little poll going, and we'll let Michael know next week whether he's filthy or not.
I am so excited. I'm so excited. So
okay, Michael. So onto some distro news.
Yeah. So about some actual, definitely not a filthy dual booter stuff. Directly the Linux kernel, not even just like the Linux operating system as like a generic. We're going to talk about the actual kernel.
Yeah.
4.20 was released this week, and it's codenamed Shy Crocodile. Which is awesome and also ridiculous. I love it though. This release contains the basically a modified version of the really ridiculous performance hit that we had. They announced like a few weeks ago where there was like 50% loss of performance. They have fixed that as far as like only applying to certain processes that absolutely need it and not to other processes that they don't really. So instead of going like the entire gambit, they just only thing that's necessary. So the STIBP patching is much more reasonable, which is fantastic. So
is it user switchable? Can you turn it off if you wish?
I think it's up to the distro whether or not they want to activate it. So because I don't know if the individual user could do that because it's probably going to be like a flag inside of the kernel for the distro.
Oh, right.
But it's possible for a distro to facilitate a switch for that. So it's definitely they did make it where it's interchangeable. You could turn it off or on, but I don't know how it's accessible to the user or not. That's really up to whatever distro you use. Probably like things like Arch would probably give you the option because you probably install the different variations of it pretty quickly.
I use Arch.
Oh, okay. Good. Thanks for that, Ryan.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and there's quite a few things that are really good about this. Like the Nuvo drivers got good support for like HDMI 2.0, which is I'm pretty sure is the current mainstay version, and 2.1 is the one that's coming out, something like that.
Yeah,
but this is really cool stuff. Has anybody checked this out?
Yeah, I have it. There's a lot of neat things that were included in this that I thought were fun. We did talk about the mitigation like you did last week, but they've also added in support, for instance, like the Xbox S controller rumble feature. So if you've ever played a console game and it has that rumbling in it, when you get shot or kind of adds in that effect to the game, they now have that added in there during gameplay, which I think is cool. They also added support for other hardware devices out there that you may or may not like the Apple's Magic Trackpad and things like that, but just giving people more options if they're used to it or coming from other things. Personally, I hate that Magic Trackpad anytime I ever use one, but some people love it. So it's awesome that they have those features there. Additionally, they added in support for other CPU architectures out there, which basically is the Hygon Diana, some Chinese manufactured CPUs out there. I don't even know. I know I butchered that to death. But in essence, they're adding in a bunch of different support for other things out there. So it's very cool to see them focusing on all of these different hardware aspects of certain use cases that you may not even think about, but it's there in the Linux kernel. So if you have one, it's going to work. But that Nvidia Novu driver, interestingly enough, came up in our Telegram group because somebody was having issues, I think, on one of their Bumblebee systems and did not know that this Novu drive, I can't do it.
I think it's Nuvo.
I call it Nuvo. Yeah.
Nuvo driver is actually in the Mesa driver kit. So very interesting things out there, and I'm glad they're continuing to add to that project. Now, I did say in the comments that, hey, if you're looking to game and things like that, you're not going to have a great experience utilizing that open source driver. That doesn't mean the work that the folks that did this is not absolutely incredible, amazing, and all of that stuff. It just has limitations out there for it, and they're well aware of that.
Yeah, and to be fair, it's also kind of the thing because of like they don't have like documentation from Nvidia to actually make the drivers work really well with the hardware, so that they couldn't make it for gaming, specifically because Nvidia wants to be as most annoying as possible. So it's not that the Nouveau people aren't making great progress, because the fact that they can do this without having any
it's amazing.
Yeah, like because they're reverse engineering everything, and it's very impressive.
Yep.
What I find quite strange, though, is it says here, support for the Xbox S controller's rumbling feature. Is that specifically to the S? Because my Xbox controller's been rumbling on ETS2.
Yeah, it's the Xbox One S.
Since I first plugged it in. So is it just specifically the S one?
Yes. The Xbox One S controller.
But this is why that's important, because a lot of times, somebody will go to a store and they'll buy a controller for their PC. They're going to grab that Xbox One S, the newest one out there, and they're going to plug it in the computer, use it. Then they switch to Linux and they're like, oh, the controller doesn't work. But now you go into Linux, controller's going to work fine and all that stuff, because that's the latest controller out there.
Every time I see a news thing about the Rumble stuff, it always reminds me of the N64 Rumble pack, where you actually had to buy a specific thing to plug into it.
And you couldn't use that at the same time that you used the memory card?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, also in the news, we have LibreELEC. Did I do it right, Michael? Give me a thumbs up.
That is
All
it.
Right.
There you go.
Good. Version 8.95 out here that has a new beta release. The distro tagline, if you're not familiar with it, is just enough OS for Kodi. So this is something that's very popular out there for setting up top box media servers on a Raspberry Pi or a similar device like that. And you want to leverage the power of Kodi, and you don't want to waste any of the power of it running anything else in the background. So it's super lightweight. It's simple to set up. When you go to download it, it basically has a ISO creator kind of built into it. So it downloads it, pushes it to an SD card or a USB drive, and then you put it in your device and it starts running. They have a bunch of new features that they've added into it, like changeable SSH passwords. That seems like a really good idea. Default firewall IP tables with simple configurations. Updates are moved to their own menu. Safe mode boot with Kodi Experience startup problems. So now you've got a safe mode option there, and initial support for retro gaming that they've added into it. So a lot of these top set boxes out there today are including like, Amazon Fire and all that stuff. They're including games in it. Well, now Kodi's throwing that in there as well. More hundreds of retro games that you can play in there with it. So this seems like a really fun project. If you got a Raspberry Pi for the holidays and you're trying to think, what should I do with it? Maybe you should check out LibreELEC.
I've had okay use with it on the Raspberry Pi. If you're using it to stream DVDs, it's probably okay. When you get into 20 and 30 gig Blu-rays, it tends to, it'll work, but it tends to buffer throughout the video a couple of times. It'll hang up. It's tolerable, but it's there. I have found a really cost-effective way is to go to someplace like Discount Electronics or eBay and just purchase like a 3rd or 4th gen i5 and flash that with LibreELEC. They have those little compact flash to SATA adapters, and put one of those in there, flash LibreELEC to it. Great little media center. Works fantastic. And then it doesn't have that problem because it has a wired internet connection. And
that's good.
I think the processor can kind of keep up a little easier.
Yeah, the Raspberry Pi is it's really good for like someone who wants to try out Kodi for the first time and they already have a Raspberry Pi, because you can have 1080p and it still be quite good on the Raspberry Pi 2 and 3. With the 1 gig ones, but once you go into a certain level of quality, like they just can't keep up with it. But the Kodi interface is like is such a smooth thing now. Like the latest interface started with 17, I think, which was Krypton. I'm pretty sure that was called Krypton. They just completely redesigned the whole thing, and it looks smooth and it works great. And I think that the LibreELEC is absolutely the best OS specifically for Kodi if you wanted to use it on a set-top box type of thing.
It's really the only one, isn't there?
OpenELEC is another one. There's OpenELEC, there's
this was a fork of that, right?
Yeah, it was LibreELEC is a fork of OpenELEC, because OpenELEC they basically had a falling out between the developers, and the developers wanted to stay in line closer to the release of Kodi, and the OpenELEC people apparently didn't care. And so when you see a new release of OpenELEC, it's like 6 months maybe after Kodi comes out. Whereas when LibreELEC comes out, it's like maybe a couple days from the release of Kodi.
All right.
So like right now, this is a beta of LibreELEC, but it's based on an RC of Kodi. So the Kodi hasn't even come out yet, and they're already making beta releases for it. So like that's why I like LibreELEC, because they're always like super close to release times with Kodi itself.
Now, I keep hearing about using the Nvidia Shield as a media center box. Is that a good idea? Noah's giving me lots of thumbs up and dances. Look at all those dances. My goodness.
Yes, fantastic idea. The thing is, the Nvidia Shield, I actually I fought this for a long time, right? I thought I don't want something that I have to put on the cloud. I don't want something I have to register for an account for with Google. I don't want something that's running Google devices all throughout my house. It just seems like a really bad idea.
Yeah.
And Ryan, I feel like you of all people, like I'm striking some chords here, because you don't even want it on your phone.
No.
So imagine putting these on every TV in your house and then managing having to update those all the time. So I struggled with that for a long time. What I eventually came to was this: when you actually use it, it is so much faster, so much cleaner, so much more responsive, because it's literally a gaming device that you're running. You're barely touching 15% of what it's actually capable of doing. And it becomes so responsive that it's hard to ignore. And so I actually redid the entire network layout of my house to accommodate the Nvidia Shield.
Nice.
I created entirely separate VLAN that is just called the Internet of Things network. And the only thing those devices can talk to is the default gateway. They can't talk to anything else in the house. And so the idea is that essentially I've done the best I can to secure that environment and let them go out. And at the same time, I get the fast and responsive and usefulness of Kodi. Well, I guess the file server has access to that too, but because I can't stream media without it.
Right.
But yeah, it's an absolutely fantastic device. And then they actually, Nvidia, because they like to screw with me, they had two versions. They had the regular Nvidia Shield that had a 16 gig onboard storage, and then they had the 500 gig Pro model that also had an IR receiver. They have since discontinued the Pro model, so you can only get the 16 gig version without the IR receiver. But our friends at Flirk have a small little USB IR receiver that you can plug into the 16 gig model, and then you can tie it into all of your home automation stuff. So we're right back to where we started, except for you don't have the 500 gig storage, but
well, the prices have dropped significantly on them. Even brand new right now, I was just looking, $169. I remember they were $260, $270 when they came out.
You can actually get them for $125 when they're on sale. I bought a couple at the last Black Friday sale for $120 on Target.com.
Nice.
But how does that compare by spending, let's say, $100 on a mini PC?
It's way better for a couple of reasons. First of all, a PC, even with something like LibreELEC, is just not designed to be attached to your television, right? Mm-hmm. So some of the first issues you're going to have right off the bat is you're going to have to run a thick, regular IEC, whatever you call it, the power cord for the computer. And so all of the home entertainment centers and stuff, they all have these little conduits that are designed for small little power cords. And now you got this bulky power cord. Second of all, the Nvidia Shields are fanless. So if you're using it inside of a home theater environment, you don't have any of the fans running you're going to have that on a PC, as well as the BIOS beep and all of that. Mm-hmm. And the boot time, because everything is solid state inside of the Nvidia Shield, it's literally designed to power on and then go back into sleep and come on and off depending on the remote commands. Whereas a computer has to be told to go to sleep, come back awake, and you've got to kind of go through that, at least that initial boot up process, kind of to come back from a suspend state. So I would say there's a number of
size difference, right?
Yeah, and the prices is not that much anymore, because like this the price of the Shield is like maybe $20-$30 more than what you can give those like really like kind of like underpowered crummy. Like,
are you talking about the
PCs.
Intel Nook and stuff like that?
No. The mini PCs where you can go to Amazon and get like mini PCs that are like they're like very super thin towers.
The bones.
Yeah. So it's not worth it. It's not worth it then, saving those extra few bucks. Just go for the Shield and work out how to set it all up.
I bet you, I honestly, Zeb, I think if you priced it out, I could almost guarantee you'd end up spending more on a PC than you would on the Shield. If you account for everything, if you account for the fact that you'd have to buy flash storage to get the same speed, if you account for the fact that you'd have to buy the, a remote and all of that, I think by the time you get through all of that, I think you'd end up spending more to do the PC.
Right. Cool.
So Darktable 2.6.0 has been released. Now, if you have a camera and you want to play with it, you absolutely have to have Darktable. We talked about this a little bit either last week or the week before. Darktable is a fantastic piece of software that essentially lets you do light touches of editing on your photos. A lot of people associate Photoshop with photo editing. Really, Photoshop is more for creating art, whereas Darktable is for kind of retouching up photos. And they have made a number of improvements, a new module that allows you to retouch based on image frequency layers, a new module that allows you to replace a base curve with shadows and highlights, a new module that allows you to duplicate inside of Darkroom or with the possibility to add a title or create a standard duplicate. All of those kinds of things are available, and it's one of those, to me, it's one of those tools that allow you to be a better photographer, because I'll go out and I'll shoot some images, and there's always something out of a batch that I'm like, I wish I had changed. I wish I had done a little bit better on this particular thing, controlled the light a little bit better, balance, forgot to white balance, whatever it is. Darktable will allow you to do that, and then allow you to batch process onto a number of images. It supports a wide range of what we call raw sensor data. So you can pull raw photos from Nikon or Canon or Olympus, Sony, all of those. You can bring in that raw sensor data, and Darktable is able to process that and then produce very high quality images, which is something that you'd not be able to do without, if you don't have a piece of software like this. You're going to rely on the camera's processor, the camera's processing ability to translate that sensor data into an actual image. And Darktable is going to do that a lot better than your onboard camera system is going to be able to do. So it really broadens your ability as a photographer.
Yeah, it's amazing how much work goes into these tools. When you look at it, in this release in 2.6.0, there were 1,600 plus commits, plus bug fixes on top of all of that for this tool. I mean, it's just so much work and passion and love goes into these products that we get to go out there and utilize for no cost up front, although you should be donating to them.
Free. Yeah.
It's free. If you do utilize it a lot, consider donating to the project, because I know they would benefit from that. But
100%.
What was really interesting is, like, once we talked about it last week, I decided to do some research to find other photography places that are outside of the open source Linux enthusiast section. And there was a bunch of stuff on Reddit where people were talking about, there was a photography section on Reddit where they were like, who prefers Lightroom versus Darktable? Which one should I get? And blah, blah. There was probably about 70% of the people advocating for Darktable. Even though they don't,
no Linux bias.
Yeah, and they have no bias for Linux or open source and didn't care. They just said it was better. And
do you have a link? You think you can track down a link to that Reddit thread? I'd love to.
Yeah, I'll have to find it in my history, but I'll totally look for it. But it was really cool, because there was one guy who was specifically talking about how he immediately transitioned to Darktable after the Lightroom announced their new version, which was the consumer friendly version. So he started digging into Darktable, and then realized that not only is Darktable good, it's better than what he already had with Lightroom, because it could do way more, and the plugin system was much better, and they had way more updates and all that kind of stuff. It was really cool to see that, because it just shows you Darktable is not just an open source enthusiast product. It's also, it has potential to become the industry standard for photographers.
Could you imagine getting a hold of Michael's subreddit history? I imagine it's our hairstyles, our fashion.
I'm a mod of hairstyles.
Our punctuality. Oh, well, my microphone on again. I'm sorry.
Wow. I don't think it would even let me touch our punctuality.
Yeah.
No.
Well,
I'm the mod of our procrastinators.
Our procrastinators.
All right, then. So moving on, we have a new file manager that's appeared recently. But rather interestingly, it's got a paywall. And we'll get into some discussions of that. It's been created by a gentleman called Tony George. Now, you might not recognize that name, but if you're a Ubuntu user, you will probably recognize TG 2008 PPA, because that's where he makes available things like Timeshift, Conky Manager, and the Aptic Backup, and others. Now, so he's decided to make a file manager, which is going to be a hard task anyway, because most people have already made up their mind what file manager they're going to use, whether they stick with the one that's with that came with the distro that they installed, or whether they have their own favorite to port across. So what was interesting about this is it comes with every sort of feature you would expect a file manager to have anyway, but then hidden behind the paywall is the ability to write an ISO to a USB, image optimization with optimizing PNGs, reducing JPEG quality, remove color, reduce color, and all sorts of other stuff, some PDF tools, and the ability to download via YouTube. Now, what was interesting for me was the article made the point that all of these features are behind the paywall, but there's been no commit for 3 months. So you're paying for development that doesn't appear to be happening. What's your guys' take on this?
I found this fascinating because on one side of the spectrum, I think that it's difficult out there for people who do fantastic work like Tony George has done to get people to realize that, yeah, it's free and open source, but you probably should donate to the project, right? And we've done a lot of work trying to get the word out about that on our platform, saying, hey, if you use it a lot, donate to these projects, because while they do it out of the kindness of their heart, it still takes a lot of time away from their families, time away from, their own work and other things where they could probably make more money. So I understand the want to go in there and create. First of all, you can use the file manager without paying anything. Yeah. It's the extra features that you're paying for here. So I kind of went back and forth on my emotions on it, because on one side, it's nice for the developers to try to find a way to make some extra money. And these are things you don't have to have in a file manager to this extra features. At the same time, it's a file manager. And I looked at the list of stuff and I was like, I don't really need any of it. But that's not to say somebody else wouldn't. That was my take on it.
And did any of you install it and try using it?
I have not tried it yet, no.
No way, there's a paywall.
There's a paywall.
No.
But I'm interested in it, though.
It actually works very well. And what I liked about it is straight out of the back, when you go into dual pane mode, one directory on the left and another directory on the right, and you want to copy files from one to the other, you haven't got to do your copy, move to the window and paste, or copy, tab across and paste. There's actually an option that says copy to other window or move to other window, and that's straight off of a right mouse click, which is something that we have in Peppermint built into Nemo. It's not normally available on the right mouse click. It's normally available on the edit, copy to and move to. But he's obviously taken some very good features. It does things in a really different way. I was expecting to see my mapped drives that I've got, where I've gone in and said, okay, this is going to be called the data drive, this is going to be called the F drive. But it doesn't do that. It just lists every single hard disk that you've got on your machine. So I then had to go to my 1 terabyte SSD, drop down a menu, and then I could find my data drive. So that was a little bit strange, but the actual use of it, the feel of it, the look of it, it's typical Tony George, and it's been very well written. Would I take this across instead of Nemo? Well, depends if I can remember how to get the unattached Nemo, because isn't Nemo part of the Cinnamon desktop?
Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's attached anymore. But it used to be. It used to be attached. I'm pretty sure that they separated it so that it doesn't depend on Cinnamon anymore. But it still has a little it still has a lot of legacy code from the previous forks and stuff like that. So a file manager is interesting because most people just use whatever comes with their distro and don't really care about it, because it's a file manager. I just want to see my files. And I understand that, and I would also say that there are some points to say that some file managers are definitely better than others. So, Dolphin is obviously the best, and so it's understandable that you would pick what you get used to, but it also kind of want you to try out the new abilities for various different file managers, because a lot of people don't even know about the dual pane thing that many file managers have, and in some file managers, you can do the dual pane thing and just drag and drop from one to the other, and you can make a copy and stuff like that. There's so many options you could have, and it's possible that just as people finding this by itself might actually get them interested in trying out other file managers in general. But as far as the paywall goes, I don't know, because when I first saw this, I was like, oh great, another file manager, and it has a paywall. But then I saw who made it, and I was like, oh, okay, I was judgy way too fast, because Timeshift and Conky Manager are really good.
Amazing.
Yeah. They're very good. And it's just, I understand why like the people were kind of bothered by, like the article is talking about the last commit 3 months ago. But what about all the applications that people promote that haven't had an update in like a year? But because it's not behind a paywall, people were like, oh, this is so great, even though it's not been touched for a year. But why is that okay? But if someone takes 3 months to work on something else, like for example, it's not like he's only doing this one file manager. He's also working on TimeShift. When was the last time TimeShift updated? You got to take that in consideration because it's one person. Like there's different like levels where you got to balance like whether it's a valid point or not. And I think that this is an interesting approach because freemium is kind of like a new model that works in many ways for whether it's services or whether it's software itself. It depends on how is it licensed? Like, how do you, once you pay the donation, how does it become?
That's always my question with this stuff. Because the first thing I think when I see this stuff is, okay, I moved to a new computer. Do I have to pay $10 again? How's the license transfer? How does all this work? Because it's just an annoyance. That's the whole point of Linux. Like when you would do a Windows install, you're sitting there for 2 hours looking for all your different licenses to find and transfer them over. And then you got to call Microsoft and sit on the phone because they think you've used the license more than once. And I just don't want to, that world.
So, to your point, to exactly what you're talking about, to your point, one of the first times that Linux ever really, really clicked for me and I went, this is how I sell it to other people, was I was away from home and left my laptop charger at a training center. I was out of town for training and I wasn't going to be back until Monday. So I was going to have to go 3 days without my computer, which wasn't going to fly because at the time I was working for a software company and I had to have my laptop. I called my boss up. I said, what do you want me to do? And he says, you don't have a choice. Go to Best Buy, buy a new computer and expense it because you got to have one. You can't go without a computer for 3 days. So I went to buy a computer and ended up loading Linux on it. And all of the software that I needed, I just pulled from repos. And that was one of the very first times early on in my career when I went, oh, this is what computing can be like when you don't have artificial restrictions on it, right? Most of us don't mind paying for software. Exactly what Michael said. We don't want to pay for hassle. So especially for something like a file manager, like it's one thing if it's like, oh, my video conferencing software. Okay, well, I'll just wait till Monday till I can get that. My file manager, like I can't.
It's like
there's a disconnect for me. And there's some now if I can pay for it and he just sends me like the deb or the RPM or whatever, or the snap package, and then I just have that software and once I've quote unquote paid, then I just have access to the repo like Paravel System does with Rivendell. If you pay them, you get access to the repo, and then once you have that information, it's kind of on you to just be on the honor system, not to hand that information out to other people. But if that's the way they do something like that, I'm all on board. If it's every time I install my file manager, I go to browse documents and it says enter license key. Not so much.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was going to say. Is like as long as if the paywall is behind just an access, so I just have an account and then I could download the file and then do it and it's done. Like if that's actually completely reasonable and I have no problem with that. And most of the time I think that like what he's asking for is what, $10 or something. Like
$10 or you join his Patreon,
or
which
you can
could
join
be,
his Patreon.
Yeah, it could be $1 a month.
It's not what he's asking for. He's worth it, every penny for it. Right. I would pay him $10 just to go sign my Steam account. Like the dude's cool, man. He writes awesome software. I just don't. It gives. I don't know about it. It leaves me with a weird feeling because I'm like Noah. Like I don't want a situation where we get into Linux where all the devs start doing this, and I got to pay $10 to unlock this and $10 to unlock that, and there's got to be a way to still support, these individuals without, having to do
the paywall. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just one final feature before we moved on, and I was surprised that the guy didn't list it in his article. That one of the icons at the top of the file manager is terminal. And I thought, oh, okay, this is cool. You're in that file directory. You click on a terminal and up pops your terminal window. No, it's got a built-in terminal in the file manager.
Cool.
So if you've got a dual pane session going on and you're in the left-hand pane and you click terminal, your bottom quarter of that screen becomes the terminal, the window that you're in. And then when you shut down the file manager, the terminal bit, part of it shuts down as well, which I thought was quite interesting.
That is very cool. And also if you push F4 in Dolphin, terminal.
Yeah, you can do that in most file managers, but you get a separate terminal window. This is
no. It's built into Dolphin. It's built into Dolphin, and it also stays if you change your folder you're in, the terminal listing is like CDs automatically to that folder, so you're always attached to it. It's fantastic.
Cool.
I mean, and the other thing it just reminded me, Zeb, when you said that, is that one of the features it talks about under the paywall is the video download, which utilizes someone else's tool, YouTube Downloader.
Yeah.
So again, I just start getting.
Well, the thing is that there's a kind of a reasonable understanding for this one, mainly because like depends on how they integrated the YouTube DL. If they are managing the updates of YouTube DL, that's good because it's kind of a pain for regular people because you have to use a specific command for updating inside of YouTube DL. You can't use your regular package manager because it updates so much.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that you could kind of say that it's possible that they would add an extra benefit in that sense. But I mean, overall, I think that it depends on how they do the licensing. If they don't do licensing, they just allow you to download the package or whatever. So how about?
By the way, I just learned something amazing though. I'm sorry,
What's
Michael. If you push F4 in Dolphin, it opens your terminal. That is so cool. I didn't know that existed.
Yeah, it's awesome, and I use it all the time. But the best part is that it sticks to your when you change to different folders. Like you go to a subfolder, the command in the terminal is automatically adjusted for that particular folder, so you're always
really
available.
Neat.
And you can also do double pane terminal.
If you haven't tried it before, give it a go. Polo File Manager from Tony George.
And I want to go check it out and see like how they do the downloads and stuff to see if it is like licensed or not.
We're about to find out during this episode of Destination Linux because I just bought it for $10. So
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I posted a picture of it in the Destination Linux Telegram group. So if you're not participating in the Telegram group, then you're only going to get part of the show this week.
Yep. There you go.
There you go. Good reference. So while Noah tries it out, we're gonna move on to the next topic, which is there are some trends showing that Linux is having domination. I mean that's kind of been true for like a decade, but it's really nice to see like it laid out like this is how much it dominates, and also Linux is everywhere apparently. So. The recent data from the IDC info brief shows just how dominant Linux is becoming. In the server space, it's pretty much like completely and in the supercomputers, it's 100% dominant. But it says, in fact, it shows Linux is the only endpoint OS that is growing on a global scale, while others like Windows are remaining flat, and in some cases, kind of declining. If you look in like the IoT space and stuff. Windows market share stayed at 39% in 2015, and in 2017, while Linux grew 30% in 2015 and 35% in 2017. So it's just constantly accelerating. So Ryan, what piqued your interest in this particular stats?
I mean, that alone to me was quite amazing. But then when they go into this article, they talk about why Linux growth, what they're attributing Linux's growth to.
Wow.
It all makes perfect sense here, right? You've got cloud spending, large player adoption, Internet of Things, security concerns, and cost sensitivity that all companies are really worrying about at this point. And what fits the bill for all of those? I mean, we would all say Linux, but obviously everybody else is seeing it too. And if you look at those numbers, I think it's really interesting that Windows market share is staying completely flat and Linux is growing here. So Microsoft has kind of stopped growing in that Windows market share entirely, and Linux is continuing. It's got a long way to go because Windows has been very dominant for a long time, but that growth is a super positive sign that everything we thought should happen is happening with Linux.
I question if it has as far as to go as Meets the ILA. And I say that because I look around when I go from business to business. I look at what applications they're using, and then I go, I wonder if that person could use Linux. And I got to tell you, it's the proverbial fart in a hurricane when I find somebody that has something that's so critical to their infrastructure and it only runs on Windows. Like the vast majority of applications and demands today are web-based. And the last remaining hurdle up till now has been that there are some web-based applications that have based their infrastructure around Internet Explorer and then obviously Edge. And with Microsoft discontinuing the rendering engine for Internet Explorer and switching over to the Chrome engine, obviously that hurdle is about to go away whether we like it or not. And so I would venture to say that we're very, very close to being there today. Yeah. Never mind where we're going to be in a year.
Yeah, and also with all all the work people are being done on like so many different levels of like the IoT space, the cloud space, and even Valve doing the work for getting Windows games to play on Linux with the Steam Play stuff. Like all this stuff combined is just showing like how much interest is in Linux and basically every factor. So like every industry.
I guess part of it is interest in Linux, but I would argue that a bigger part of it is just an efficiency of code and a license structure, right? It's very difficult to pirate. In fact, it's impossible to pirate Office 365, right? How do you pirate a service? Mm-hmm. You either pay your subscription fee and they let you in, or you don't. And businesses have kind of picked up on the fact that if you can roll something out and you maintain one code base, then somebody can use a MacBook, a Windows laptop, a Linux computer, a Chromebook, a tablet. It doesn't matter. If they have access to a web browser, they can get to your software. It eliminates all the software piracy problems that plagued in the past. From a support standpoint, it's much easier because essentially if there is a problem, it's usually on the back end. If somebody's web browser is running right, their website, the software is running right. So you're looking at big companies who have no interest in Linux, have no care about it, but like Intuit is putting QuickBooks on Linux. We use QuickBooks on Linux, and it's not because that Intuit's a great company. It's just that it's all web-based, as is their tax preparation software. So I think that there are so many market variables that are pushing people towards web software and Chrome specifically that I think that Linux is going to easily become the de facto standard because it's not subject to all of the license problems and virus problems and malware and security and vulnerabilities that Windows has.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a good point for the web stuff. I mean, it kind of creates another issue of like the web being dominated by Google, but
yes, it does. Over 85% is Chrome domination.
Yeah.
So here's a good question for you then. One of the things that people talk about from a virus standpoint is that Linux doesn't get hit as much because it's been built differently. So therefore it's a lot harder to hack it. But if Linux becomes that much more popular, won't the virus manufacturers sort of like move away from Windows and try and attack Linux more?
They will definitely try to do that, but it doesn't mean it's going to actually work.
Mm-hmm. No, but they will be. They'll be successful. Sure. You will absolutely, because here's the thing. It was Matt Hardley who said this first, and he's absolutely right about this. If it can run code, it's vulnerable. Yeah. The fact that we have privilege escalation and had it 10 years before Windows got us a certain amount of leeway. But let's face it, in today's world, Windows 10 has privilege escalation just like Linux does.
Well, no, because privilege escalation in Windows, all you do is click OK.
That's not true. Well, it depends on how the group policy is set up, but in most Windows environments, at least in a professional computers, it requires a password. Well, even by default, if you don't touch anything, as long as you set a user password, when you try to go into privilege escalation in Windows 10, it will prompt you for a password. But so we got a little bit of a head start there. But the vast majority of the immunization to viruses and malware stems from the fact that, as Zeb pointed out, Linux is not as popular. That said, the security needle, and I've gotten into this discussion on my show quite a bit because people email and write stupid, idiotic things like Linux isn't as secure as I make it out to be. We are moving that needle forward, right? Windows today doesn't have anything in the way of SE Linux. They have nothing even close to that, context-aware security practices, whereas SE Linux, we had that 5 years ago, and we're continuing to move that needle forward. So by the time that we get to this point where Linux is being targeted by these attackers, how many more layers of security will we have wrapped around Linux that Windows and Mac, they haven't even started that. And that doesn't even get into all of the security features into System D, all of the security systems into separating the kernel from the user space and all that stuff. All of those things are things that we have ahead of the game of Windows. So in a way, you're right. It will become a bigger target. And yes, I think they will be attacked more. But I think that their success is going to be vastly reduced as compared to Windows or Mac OS.
I mean, I would kind of argue they're being attacked now pretty heavily because of the popularity of the cloud. And what you see in most of these cases, and that would be the honeypot for any hacker, right? Your most serious organizations and even government-run organizations hacking other governments are going for the cloud servers and things like that. Their success in every study and that I've seen in news item out there is usually related on some type of social hacking or getting somebody to do something stupid like enter their password from clicking an email link and those type of things. So I'm not saying Linux, and I agree with Noah 100%. I think they will be successful. I think they'll find ways through it, but I think it's going to be a different kind of hacking in order to achieve it than what you would see in Windows.
Agreed.
All right, so this is one of my favorite things to do. Noah, this is your first time that you're going to do this. Now, here are the rules. It's very important. We're going to make our predictions for 2019.
I think it's my
now,
first time too.
Now, okay, well, now both of you get the rules.
Okay, technically it's not. I've done predictions. I've just not done it on this show.
Right.
Yeah, well, we do it way differently because our predictions are always wrong and they're horrible. So make sure.
That's true.
Well, nobody told me that. I picked real prediction.
No,
Hold on, I have to rewrite.
No, they should be
Let's see.
semi-real
Linux
predictions
fail.
out there. Actually,
Windows
I
is
think
going to be
Rocco had.
dominant in 2019 on the servers. Michael will be on time.
Did we ever
Okay,
figure
I'm
out,
ready.
Zeb, who was the most right last year? By the way, I think it was Rocco, wasn't it? I know he failed on his Solus. He's going to be on Solus the whole year, but I think
I think he was the only one that got one right, and that was somebody who has made an actual distribution based on snaps or something. Or
Yeah. But it was also kind of true in the time when he said it. It was actually kind of already true. But
yeah,
it depends on how specific he was, but it was very open. It's like, well, Ubuntu Core is technically an all snaps thing, so you could kind of get away with it.
well, maybe instead of guessing, we should go back and look at what the predictions were for last year, and then score them up.
Nice.
So that's easy. That's no,
All right.
no, and then whether or not Rocco got one or not.
So we're going to make very accurate predictions. You
Perfect.
can trust us. We are experts in this industry. So, Michael,
Yep.
you're up first. What are your predictions for 2019?
Okay, I have a few. The first one is Plasma will continue to grow in momentum. I think that's just like an easy, probably going to happen. Raspberry Pi 4 will be released. I think they might do 2 releases, like an upgrade to like the whole Raspberry Pi 4, and then an upgrade to like the 0, or the
good one.
Really small ones. And also I think that 4K will be continuously being pushed by the tech crowd, and it will still be completely pointless to 99% of people because who cares? And it's 3D on TVs. It's basically the same kind of thing. Nobody cares. It's like, yeah, I can extra pixels and then blow them up to make them look like they were already supposed to if you didn't get the ridiculous high res. Like, why do people do that? Anyway, the next one I think is actually probably not going to happen, but it's potential, and if it does happen, it'll be amazing. Valve will announce that 10% of their catalog will be officially whitelisted by the Steam Play, the project by Valve, because there's support for various games, but they're not like the whitelisting means specifically Valve supports it. So I think like 10% of the catalog is going to get that, and then maybe like 50% will be tested by like the Proton DB kind of thing. And then finally, I think Samsung will do a lot more innovations with the DeX, allowing it to be more phones supported, more tablets to support it, and things like that. And we'll have like potentially multiple desktops, or maybe multiple distros, but at least multiple desktops on top of the Linux on DeX platform that they have. So it's potential that again it'll be the year of the Linux desktop.
Oh wow! You already got yelled at for that.
I know.
And
That's
now
why I
you're
put it
doing
in there.
again. All right. Well, my predictions are that Microsoft re-enters the mobile market with an Android-based OS in 2019 and Surface-like hardware. So, interesting year we've had in 2018 where Microsoft makes better-looking hardware and more functional hardware than Apple, and Apple makes horrible hardware. So, I think Microsoft.
What are you talking about? Apple's their stuff is top-notch.
Oh, well done. And dongle gate. You just need lots of dongles. So I think this is going to be pretty exciting to see what they can do with as far as Android fans out there, to see what they can do with the hardware, because the Surface line, the tablet, the laptop that they have, absolutely gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. It should run Linux, but it's beautiful hardware. So I think it'll be interesting to see what Microsoft does in that arena. I think AMD, Zeb, listen up. I need you to perk your ears up, is going to release the fastest GPU on the market and outsell Nvidia in 2019. You heard it here first, my friend. It's going to happen.
You think it'll be faster than the
2080 Ti? Yeah.
Excuse me, Titan RTX?
Yeah, it's going to blow it away. Everything NVIDIA has is going to be hogwash compared to...
It will take a lot to blow away the Titan.
There is a good point. Our friends at a bunch of podcasts, Wimpy mentioned something about the ray tracing issue. Is like the RTX ray tracing is actually a computation problem thing, that AMD has always done computation better than Nvidia. So just because of that one particular piece, that they could automatically win because they perform better on computational stuff.
AMD's gonna stomp them, man. And last but not least, Michael still shows up late to every single recording. Noah becomes a gamer, and Zeb, you're gonna fall in love with pixel games. Those are my predictions.
It's exciting that you did Destination Linux predictions, because I did that too. I just didn't put them in the doc because it's funnier that way. So my predictions is I think that Canonical will go public in 2019 at some point. I think that Microsoft will either make an offer to buy them directly, or they will own or buy a controlling stake in Canonical. Well, here's
controlling.
Why. You look at what Red Hat is doing and what Canonical needs to do to stay competitive, right? So Canonical has more machines than Red Hat has, right? That's undisputed. But Red Hat makes more money than Canonical does. And so and at the end of the day, everybody's got to pay bills. So they've got to find some way to level that up. And the only way I see them doing that is to take the company public or get bought out by a larger organization that has another funding model, and then uses that funding model to move money back into the development and continuation of their Linux operating system. So I think there's a good possibility of that. I also think that Red Hat is going to have their most profitable year yet in 2019. We continue to watch Red Hat grow. Now they've got the backing of IBM. I'd say that's almost a surefire prediction. And this is kind of interesting, I think CentOS is going to go away. I think that CentOS is going to go away because if you look at the direction of where Red Hat is, they've opened up their developer license, so you can get an actual license for Red Hat, get updates, packages, all that stuff for free, just as being part of their development community. And then you've got CoreOS, and then you've got Fedora, which is taking on more of a workstation-like enterprise-grade operating system. And so I'm watching those things kind of converge, and I start to ask myself, where does CentOS fit into that picture, right? Because they're a project that's supported by Red Hat, but they're kind of becoming unnecessary. That CentOS was great when we needed a place to test things before we could run it on Red Hat. Now we can do that on Red Hat, and we can kind of do it on Fedora, and we can definitely do it on. So I'm just kind of watching that kind of pivot. And I think that will be.
Well, you could argue that some companies depend on CentOS. For example, like shared web hosting companies are almost always on CentOS and not Red Hat.
So what would stop them from going to a Red Hat developer license?
Well, because would they have to have a developer license for every server that they run?
Yes, but they're free.
I don't know what would be like. I don't know what would stop them for it, but it's just something like it's interesting because I think that it's a very interesting prediction, and I think you're probably on the right path, because I think that CentOS does at this point doesn't really fit into the mold. But I think that if anything, they'll just kind of they might announce that it'll go away, but it won't go away for a couple years or something. I think it'll.
Yeah, maybe we'll see, and it also relies on Fedora taking on some form as well. I also think that Zeb is going to arrive in the U.S. sometime in 2019. I think that Michael is going to run out of disk space sometime in 2019.
That's almost a guarantee.
And I think that Ryan is going to switch to Nvidia.
Oh my God!
Oh yeah!
How dare you, sir? How dare you?
I'm here to help when your desktop starts crashing.
Everything's been way too upbeat, so it's time for me to bring it down to earth. Okay, so my first prediction is there will be no new Linux-based phones appear in 2019.
Boo.
Okay, I think there will be more kernel problems that will occur, and vulnerabilities are found, but that never actually affect people, apart from the fact that they put the mitigation code into the kernel and it slows everything down.
No.
And then this one is from Ryan. I will never fall in love with pixelated games.
I don't like it. I don't like it. You will fall in love with pixelated.
I'll find at least one that you will go, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
I'll stream it. At least one. That's an extra prediction. At least one game he will stream that's pixelated.
Yep, I like it.
Never going to happen.
But
all right, then. So on to my favorite subject.
Exactly. The games section. Zeb loves every pixelated game we talk about, or at least he will. The first up, we're going to talk about the now free-to-play Battle Royale Darwin project, now it's possible to play on Linux thanks to the Steam Play. So this is it's kind of similar to Fortnite. I don't know if it's like if it works in the same way of the building structure, but it's like the same style of like graphics and things like that. In how the Fortnite works, and it does the same battle royale structure of the everybody's all thrown into a small area, and then after time the area gets smaller and smaller based on like whatever reasoning. Most of the time people say it's like gas or some kind of like I don't know. There's an extra reason for it
bombs,
being
gas, something that
being
keeps shrinking.
Being outside the zone automatically you get killed if you're for a certain amount of time. But this is really cool because I think it's always good to see competition in this space. But also Linux has not been able to have much usage to battle royale games except for like absurdly pixelated games. Like there's some pixelated to a point is fantastic. It can go a little too far, and it becomes like little circles and blobs and stuff, and it's like, okay, who cares? But in this case, I think it's great to have games like this that are coming to the Linux platform because we can now have like a nice battle royale Destination Linux style.
There you go. And you've got like crafting in this game is slightly different than Fortnite, but you're right, a very similar theme. And the reason why you're going to see a lot of these games happen is because Fortnite announced $3 billion of profit in 2018 on Fortnite. That's billion with the B on the video game. So all those microtransactions appear to be paying off for Fortnite in there. But it's very interesting. It's free to play, just like Fortnite. So you download it, you can start going and taking on your enemies out there. But I want to specifically mention something because Noah talked about CSGO and that he would play CSGO with us. And I'm very interested in doing this. But have you checked out the Battle Royale mode that CSGO has launched?
No.
Okay, so when you log into CSGO, you're going to see this big screen because it's new, and it's going to say Danger Zone mode. And if you go into Danger Zone mode, that is basically their version of Battle Royale, and it's awesome. So
Really?
they dump you and all the players into a map. You're there, and you start collecting as many items as you can, try to find a gun, all of that stuff. But it still has the buy model. So you're going around finding cash, and then as you find cash, you can hit your B button and buy different guns and things. But some of the things that they've added to it, I think, make it really unique, like the fact that when you buy something, a drone comes and drops it off. Mm-hmm. And what that also does is you can see drones going to drop things off and let you know potentially where other players are. And there's just so many other strategy elements.
Yeah, you can shoot the drones down so you can mess them up and they can't get their stuff. It's really cool.
Yep. It's just really fun. So when we do play our CSGO tournament here, we're going to have to do some Danger Zone action in there. And CSGO's free to play now as well. So thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Are we still doing it for a charity, for a open source?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
for really Tony George. We're going to make Polo File Manager free for everyone.
Yeah. Okay, so it's the game section. Ryan writes the articles every week. So I thought, here we go. What monstrosity has he got for me this week? So I clicked on the link and I'm sitting there watching the video and I'm waiting, excuse for the pun, I'm waiting for the bomb to drop. And it didn't happen.
Yeah, I was nice this week.
Atom. It's a Fallout-inspired game that has been released with native Linux support. It's a role-playing game in a post-apocalyptic indie. It's a post-apocalyptic indie game. He still gets me with these stupid words. And inspired by classic CRPGs, whatever they are. Fallout, Wasteland, Azure, Baldur's Gate. Now, having played Vikings, Wolves of Midgard recently, I can actually now relate to the top-down role play.
Nice.
And this actually looks quite good. The only thing that put me off was I think it's been written by some Russian developers. And if you look on the Steam shop and look at the second video, there's an awful lot of stuff that's relevant if you're Russian, but it's absolutely meaningless if you're in the rest of the world. I mean, they're playing some melodramatic song in the background and there's some person lamenting away in Russian. And I'm thinking, will that take anything away from the gameplay if they keep adding all of this Russian stuff in? But the actual, the stuff itself is the typical stuff. You've got to find stuff. You've got to know what armor to wear, what guns to keep, what food to carry. You've only got that limited amount of stuff to do. So, yeah, I can imagine this would be fun to play. I'm not sure I would spend £10 on it, but if it came up in a Steam sale, I mean, I think it's $14.99 in dollars. But if it came up on a Steam sale or as part of, a package, then yeah, I wouldn't be adverse to giving it a try.
Yeah, these type of games are fantastic. Fallout's one of my favorite game series until the last one that just came out ever. They're just very fun. The turn-based RPG style is much like taking a game and adding a chess-like element to it, because basically it's you stop for a moment because you're taking turns between you and the enemy depending on who sees each other, and you have time to take your whole party and figure out the tactic that you want to execute, and then you choose what you want your characters to do, and then you hit play, and then they execute those commands, and hopefully if you've done it correctly, you're going to win against the enemies there. So that's kind of how the turn-based system works, and Fallout was kind of one of the best known ones out there for that turn-based strategy when it first came out. Now not as much turn-based in the latest Fallout games, but still a very fun type of game. And I love that people were going out there and kind of inspired by that game and making offshoots of it, because the latest Fallout game, as you know, was a horrible bomb. So
that's a nice
and
way
of
to
course,
put
the
it.
fun bit for me was you've got a car that I can jump in and drive.
There you go. I mean, what else? Were you wrecking into stuff?
I can start wrecking stuff, yeah.
Let's say that you're still sitting through this episode of Destination Linux. You're sitting at your browser and you're like, I want to check out OpenBazaar. And you've got the web address typed into the web URL, or the URL browser, but you're not sure to hit that enter button. Because if you do, within 15 minutes, the FBI will be knocking on your door. That's probably a bit overdramatic. But here's the thing. Software Spotlight this week is Tor Browser. Now, Tor is a network anonymization tool. Essentially, volunteers operate servers all around the world, and your traffic bounces from one server to another until it finally exits somewhere. Now, the thing is, even if that traffic could be tracked, which oftentimes becomes impossible because it's just too expensive to try to follow it around, even if it could be tracked, hundreds of thousands of people use those same exit relays, so trying to actually prove who was browsing that traffic becomes impossible. Tor is one of those browsers that is super easy to get up and running, and oftentimes when people hear about it, they're like, it sounds really cool to browse the dark web, to throw out some terms, but the truth is, it's actually as simple as just downloading a file and double clicking on it, and you'll run a contained version of Mozilla Firefox that is channeled through the Tor network. Now, you can set Tor up in all sorts of complicated ways. So, for example, I at my house have a Tor node that I can jump on a specific network on the house, a specific Wi-Fi network or wired network, and then it funnels my traffic through Tor, or I can get on my regular Wi-Fi and just have fast internet. So it's a fantastic project, way easier than you might think to set it up. If you haven't checked it out, make sure to check it out. We'll have a link for you in the show notes how to get the Tor browser, the Tor network up and running. It's also in your default repository if you're on Ubuntu. You can just,
I love that you gave a legitimate use case there of how you utilize it there, because so many times when you talk about Tor and these other things, they're like, oh, what's that, to browse the dark web and get drugs? No, it's actually
you can.
I mean, you can, yeah. But
that's the spirit.
You could also do that on a regular browser, but you just get caught faster.
Right. Exactly.
But the amazing thing about this is, if you think about journalists who utilize it, and if you go on their website, they have a listing of all of the different resources that have utilized Tor in the past. Journalists that use it to keep their sources from being identified, citizens who are blocked from their governments due to censorship laws, and activists and civil rights groups around the world. This allows them to have communication with each other without having as much fear as you would just being on the open internet of being caught, and being able to still organize,
and still have a decent experience with a browser. They made the Tor network itself is not that complicated, but if you've never done it before, it can definitely feel complicated. Whereas the Tor browser allows you an easier approach to doing it, because they have it all built in before it, so it'll like set up proxies for you and stuff like that. So it's a really nice way to package it for you. And also it's a fundamental piece of the Tails operating system, the Amnesic operating system.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, so it's
very cool.
I always forget about Tails. It's such a great tool.
Yep.
If you want, here, I tell you what, if you want to get into Tails or Tor or any of that, go download, purchase the documentary called Citizen 4?
Citizen 4.
And it's a documentary about Edward Snowden, and it will make you feel so cool to open up Tor, even if all you do is Google something. You'll feel like bad hacker.
DuckDuckGo.
Evil thing. Exactly. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
You know what
I know what you mean. We know what
if
you
you go to
meant.
Google, it's funnier if you go to Google, because then it says there's suspicious traffic coming from this exit node. It's great. Makes me feel very important.
So we love when our listeners communicate with us. And this week we got a tip and trick from the listeners. And by the way, we should give a shout out here to anybody doing this. Send us tips and tricks. Send us your favorite software. We will get them included in the show if we can. So it helps us obviously be able to come up with new stuff that would be interesting for other listeners out there. So send that to us in your email. And this week we got an email from Chris, and he says Z, as in the letter Z, is a utility I cannot live without, and I'm boggled at the fact seemingly nobody else uses it. It's an absolute lifesaver. We'll have a link to the GitHub that he provided us in the show notes, but basically you install this thing into your environment with a simple addition to your shell startup, and you get a hyper-intelligent one-character magic carpet that will intelligently learn your file system and commonly used paths and take you exactly where you mean with the absolute minimum of typing. For example, ZAM, this zooms me to /home, his file Amazon where he keeps his work stuff. ZPERS takes him to his personal files. And the key thing is these aren't aliases. Z is adaptive and actually stores lightweight stats about how frequently you go to various places in your file system, so it knows what you likely mean using ludicrously short abbreviations. It's a lightsaver. Thanks again for all the awesome work on the show. He also gives a thank you to Michael, but we can skip that.
Of course, we can just skip that.
No, he says, by the way, I just wanted to thank Michael once again for recommending KDE's accessibility feature. I found a happy home in Kubuntu 18.10. Runs great with nary a flaw on my rather new and otherwise largely unsupported Alienware 17 R5.
Yeah, I think they were specifically talking about the one where I described the way to zoom in on Plasma. Like the Super Plus, like that's a really nice feature.
I use that all the time since you told me about that, BT Dubs.
Good. I use it all the time too, and I don't need to or anything, but it makes it so much easier than having to zoom in your specific application. You could just zoom in the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But what was funny earlier when you said this, like the way I finish segments on This Week in Linux, I always end with we'll give you a link in the show notes and stuff. And you said that, I was like, are you gonna just not to explain what Z is? And you're just gonna
Listen, it's Z. Go out there and find it yourself and figure it out.
Exactly. But it looks like a crazy idea. Like how does it know what you want though? And the first time you use it, I understand it it learns, but how does it start learning?
Okay? You ever heard of Skynet?
I think so. Isn't that the slang term for Google?
Yes, basically. Okay. Yeah, it is interesting. I want to go in there and play with it and see how intuitive it becomes, but it seems like a pretty cool tool to have in there. So definitely check it out.
Sounds good. Well, that's the end of episode 102. I hope everybody enjoyed it. And Ryan, if you could lead off with our thank you to the patrons.
Well, a big thank you to each and every one of our patrons for supporting us, for waiting for Michael for the show to begin every week, for hanging out with us in the post show. But one of the things I do want to mention here that the Patreon money is helping to fund, which is very important, is we want to bring Zeb to America. We want to bring Zeb to America for Southeast Linux Fest. So consider becoming a patron, especially for this. When's Southeast Linux Fest coming up, Michael?
It hasn't, June, but it hasn't been officially, the date hasn't been officially set. So
we've got to come up with enough funds to get him from that, wherever he is across the other side of the world, over into the United States where we're free. Are you free over there? I'm teasing. Don't send your hate mail to me. No, but we really do want to get Zeb over to Southeast Linux Fest. So your patron donations will be going towards that here coming up soon.
We've just lost 20 patrons.
They don't want you in America.
Absolutely not. But okay, so let us know if you want Zeb in America. Send us an email to comments@destinationlinux.org. If you've got a burning question that you'd like one of us to ask, or answer. If you've got any comments that you want to make about the show, then send us that email. Or make some comments on Telegram, Discord, Google+, not for much longer, Twitter, Mastodon. And if you go to destinationlinux.org/contact, Michael has a whole load of other ways that you can contact us and leave us your information. But don't forget that email that we want for is Michael a filthy dual booter because
Thanks for that.
because he does Windows in the VM. Let's not forget that one. We want to know whether Michael's filthy or not.
To be clear, that the only thing it does is Photoshop in that VM. That's it. So it's more like the VM is just for that.
We've got it clear. Let's let our listeners
Okay.
Yeah,
decide.
Well,
because you don't want me to end up with, does that make Michael a filthy picture taker?
all right.
Anyway, Michael.
Well, I hope everybody remembers one of the most important things for liking the smash button. And also, if you would, just share the show on social media. I did that one perfectly.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you. Finally.
Until you blurted out your success, you did.
No, I don't care. That was how important it was to actually get it without fumbling. And also, if you're not aware, we also have all of our individual channels. So you should check out Zeb's. You can find him, tearing through caravans and even some dire wolves in Midgard on his stream. And you can also check out Noah with Ask Noah Show, where he gives an advice for people who call in to discuss Linux and business questions and things like that. And also check out Ryan's channel on DOS Geek.
Fill your brains.
That's like the first time you got to say it on the show. Nice. Yeah. And also you can check out my channel at tuxdigital.com, where I talk about actually always Linux related, but also This Week in Linux, Linux news podcast if you're interested.
Okay, thanks very much, everybody. Have a great week. And remember that the journey to self is just as important as the destination.
I love it.
Well done, sir. Well done.
Thanks, everyone.